So most of the music that I've written or have up in my head is relative to different parts and experiences throughout my life. And I have demos as old as 1993, 94, and quite a few of them from around 2001 to 2005, somewhere in that area. And there are a few from the last, 10 years or so. And they're all, kind of tumbling around in my head. Not everything's recorded yet. So just as a side note, I studied psychology and cognitive behavior. I published a couple of books on self-awareness, etc. So I was inspired by how our minds work, especially with our memories and our core memories specifically. So memories are, a record of our experiences and moments. And most of my memories are specific to where I lived at the time. Of course, different addresses, different moments, different memories. So it only made sense to me to reference these songs as my memory locations. As such, the title was born, Memory Locations. So with a nod to how our brains store memories as well, the hippocampus, neocortex, amygdala, those are locations as well. So these locations seemed relative to me as well as the physical locations and addresses, etc. did. So that's kind of how I put that together for Memory Locations. The song titles are referential to some of these experiences as well, obviously, but also people in my life, especially my family and especially my children. So One With You was originally recorded by me and my friend Thor, and a really good childhood friend, and we recorded this on his back deck, and he played the acoustic guitar, I played the keyboard melodies on the, some cheap Casio or whatever. And so you've got the birds in the background and the dog barking and everything. And that was how we originally recorded it. So I wanted to recreate that closely as possible to the original. And, as far as the atmosphere with the birds and the dog barking and everything, similar to that 93, 94 recording, we recorded that outside on the back of his deck. So to try to recreate that was kind of tricky, but, my memories with my grandmother and my father were spending a lot of time out at Saylorville Lake. So I recorded the nature sounds out there at the lake, and the dog barking is actually near my home, one of the neighbor's dogs. And so anyway, that whole song just resonates with me very deeply. And this song just speaks from within me.
So I'm sure that you've probably figured out, or if anyone cares, I'm a huge fan of nature. My tattoos have a lot to do with the elements, air, earth, water, fire. All my children, each one of them actually represent a different element. That's not by design, that just happened that way. And throughout much of my life, I spent a lot of time outside. And that's not a complaint at all. My grandmother, my father are all very much into being outside and being into nature and that sort of thing. So being out here at Saylorville was a key ingredient in my childhood, a memory, a huge memory. Walking the trails, boating, swimming, tubing, just driving around, walking around, coming to the visitor center and just listening to nature. My dad loved to tell stories and loved to talk. He talked a lot. I'm going to drive here a little bit again. My dad loved to talk and tell stories, and I learned a lot of things about my dad and his past just in listening to those stories. But more importantly, when we came out here, if we'd go through, there's this really good trail here next to the visitor center at Saylorville. Just take a walk on that trail and unplug. Right? We've all got our phones with us at all times. Look, I'm recording right now. But when I come out here, I'll unplug. I'll take a few pictures and that. But typically, I'm just listening and being one with nature, And that was the kind of a concept that I think I drew from my grandmother, Vera, when I was a kid, was that, we'd go outside even in her yard all the time. And she would talk about the birds, talk about, she had chickens and dogs, and Grandma was really connected to nature. I'm not so sure she wasn't secretly Mother Nature herself. Flowers, plants, trees, the air. I love her, I miss her. She's a huge inspiration for all that I do, huge inspiration for my songs. Like I said, the song One With You was written as a tribute to her, as well as Hirundo Rustica. Hirundo Rustica, which is actually defined as a barn swallow, but it's 2023. I'm not calling my song Swallow. So that song, Hirundo Rustica, was actually written at her gravesite when I was probably 18, 19 years old. I originally concepted that song, and it had words to it, just a few words, a little poem. Went out walking in the world outside just to see the sparrows fly, swallows fly. Look up to the clouds in the sky just to see if you are there, and I'm waiting for you to come outside. That was kind of for my grandmother, as is all of these swallows. I had these before before they became trendy. Yeah, nature just means a lot, and it had a lot to do with this album and a lot of the songs. So you're going to hear the trickling of water from the creek. You're going to hear, there's a lot of Sailor Bill sounds actually. Some of the birds, I use some of the waterfowl sounds that are flying around. A little bit of the spillway. Some of the rain sounds actually have a little bit of spillway snuck in there. The rain was recorded differently, obviously, but a lot of the sounds that I use on the album are derived from Sailorville and surrounding areas, and then the dog barking in One With You is from up the street from my house. It just worked out perfectly, but the stuff means a lot to me, so
not altogether sure why I just cut myself off there, but this is where I recorded a lot of nature sounds from. The birds, everything that you're hearing now, except for the dogs, of course, but the birds and nature and everything. It's a great place to relax, to come out here and just unplug. There's a really nice trail over here. This is the Sailorville Visitor Center. Been coming out here since I was a kid, and a lot of memories of being out here. I've seen a lot of development come about with this little area as well. But I took some pictures out here of my acoustic, and ended up taking a picture of my guitar up on the dam, which is actually what ended up being the cover for the single for One With You, the original single. It's been remixed for the actual album itself, but that picture was taken up on the dam, which I drove past just a little bit ago. And I used a lot of live instruments for this album, and especially this song, because my last album, which was called Manifestations, done several years ago, was a lot of samples. But this one, I wanted everything to be played by me. It was important to me that I perform as much of the instrumentation as possible. It's kind of therapeutic and felt really intrinsic to do that. And so all the tracking was done in my home studio, except for, of course, the nature sounds were recorded out here in various places and near my home and all of that, with the exception of the song Crying to Remember. And that one I'll get into a little bit later. There's a story behind that. That was recorded in my home many, many years ago. And I just remixed that for this album. So I started tracking One With You back in early April. When I began the whole project, it was one of the very first songs that I re-recorded. Of course, based on the demo that Thor and I recorded back in 1993. The software that I'm using there, I believe, is Magix is now the company, but it's it's Acid Pro 11.0. Used to be 2.0, is what I started with back in 2000. Used to be owned by Sonic Foundry. They sold out to Sony Music, or Sony Creative rather, and Sony owned them and then sold to Magix. My first album, Manifestations, was recorded. Many of those are from the sessions that were recorded back when I did the Body Furnace project with Steve. Everything was recorded on Acid Pro. Savannah behind the camera. Appreciate that good, steady, handy work there. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of The Making of Memory Locations. More episodes to come, some more behind the scenes, some special interviews, as well as more behind the scenes information on the songs and the album as a whole, and maybe a few sneak peeks before the album comes out. Thank you so much for supporting me and my music. I appreciate you more than you know.